Rosemary here. Thank you very much for tuning in to an Armeo on the Brink. I have to remind you again, please subscribe to us. Go onto any of your podcast platforms and rate us and tell us you like us, or don't, but just rate us and pay attention to us. That's what we need. If you don't know how to get on to a podcast, please don't be embarrassed by that. You are not alone. Many people have that same problem. And we will walk you through it. We'll send you a link. It's easy to listen to in Armeo on the Brink. This episode, I am podcasting live from New Orleans. I am in Louisiana at the Journalism and Women's Symposium. That is a mouthful, but look at the acronym. It's JAWS, JAWS, as in sharks are relentless in their pursuit. And in this case, it's women journalists, and they are relentless, pursuing truth and equity and justice. We're going to hear from some of those people now. I am pulling them out of sessions and in between workshops to come and sit and talk to me and to you about their latest projects. Again, as I've said before, the joy of doing a podcast is introducing you to some of the amazing people that I've met in a long career of reporting and journalism. And these are some of the women. Let's get started. I want you to meet Rachel Jones. Rachel holds the title of Director of Journalism Initiatives for the National Press Foundation in D.C. By her own description, which I love, she is a writer, a feminist, and a global citizen. And I would add to that, educator and mentor. Over a career of like 30 years, you've trained young journalists in the United States and in Kenya. You've been especially concerned about doing and getting others to start doing in-depth work on global health issues. Can you tell us a little bit of what you're doing now, Rachel, with the foundation?
So after a career as a reporter, what I found interesting about my work in East Africa, building capacity, helping journalists access information about health reporting and policy, et cetera, I wondered if I'd be able to come back to the U.S. and do that. And so that when 2016 I came back, I was approached by the National Press Foundation. They were looking for journalism trainers. They were developing a program called Widening the Pipeline, and it was targeted specifically to early career journalists of color. At a time when backlash against DEI, diversity, and equity is just flourishing in America, the National Press Foundation decided that the old trope that it's hard to find people of color who are qualified for jobs, it's hard to be able to support them, we decided that that was not true. And they were looking for someone who could lead a program that would provide those journalists with the tools, the strategies, the insights, the contacts to help them to be able to see that if they want to commit to journalism for the next 5 years, the next decade, here are the tools that you need. Here's the advice. We provide mentoring, so we provide each of them with a seasoned veteran mentor. But really what Widening the Pipeline is trying to do is build a vision in young journalists of what's possible. And so we do that through a series of in-person trainings where I invite, people that I've known through the past 40 years to come and talk to the journalists. And then we have monthly virtual trainings where speakers come, and again, it's either investigative reporting or it's nonprofit journalism. What does that mean? Our session this past week was the power of our voices as people of color in newsroom. What does it mean? How do we sort of strengthen our voice? So really, all I'm doing is being a pretty high-powered cheerleader for young people, for early career journalists of color, to help them establish what it is, what their vision is, and what their purpose is.
Okay, so I'm not even going to debate with you the need for this. We have been talking about diversifying the newsroom workforce for the entire 50 years I've been in journalism. But what I want you to talk about directly is why is this so intimidating on a national level? And in fields not just journalism, but name any other one. Why is including more people reaching out to get a diverse workforce? Why is that so threatening?
Well, I could go off on one of my rants about what's happening, particularly when it comes to the what's the term? The reckoning, the racial reckoning. What I think is going on is that there's a lot of fear. There's sort of like the last stand of supremacy, be it male supremacy, white supremacy. There's a real spirit in the air that the way things were and how we used to do things ought to continue. And so I think an opportunity was seen when it came to the anti-DEI backlash, because I think the powers that be in many circles said, all the trouble that we're going through over the past few years to try to be, quote, fair, air quote, et cetera, um, it hasn't really achieved what they think it should achieve, or is too much trouble. And so, again, I think the opportunity to just say, let's squash it. Let's pretend that there's a post-racial society and everybody gets there on the same level, and all of these false
We'll all
things
be
that were set up.
colorblind,
Well,
how we
the
say it,
whole
yes.
yearning and longing to push the colorblind narrative has really just sprung up sort of full-throated in the past couple of years. But in my work, for example, with the young people that I deal with, when I hear stories like the young woman who started out at a paper which shall not be named in the business department, and she was probably one of the first African American business reporters at this paper, not a small paper, it was a rather prominent paper. And she went in and sat down at the desk in the business department on her first day. And one of her colleagues walked up to her and he said, oh no, you're in the wrong department. You need to go sit over there. And she said, excuse me? And he said, no, you don't belong here. You go sit over there. And she says, my name is blah, blah, and I'm the new business journalist, or I'm a reporter on the desk. And he said, oh, we've never had one of you before. This is in 2023. Jeez. So, I heard these things all along early in my career. As I've told several people here, I had an editor in Washington, D.C. tell me, you don't belong here, you don't know what you're doing, and you need to go back to where you came from.
Just from a look, not an assessment of their work.
No, they told me. This is someone that told me.
Oh,
and the reason that happened is, ironically, I had actually written an op-ed about Head Start. I was a Head Start kid. Mm-hmm. And, our discussion this morning about objectivity and whether journalists should be involved is interesting. But I was covering these issues. I was hearing some really negative descriptions of women, single mothers, people of color in the halls of Congress. And so I wrote about my experience. And I was doing some great stories. I thought about the welfare reform bill and adoption or whatever. But when I was published in the Washington Post, that particular editor, I think, sort of typifies this whole fear of loss of control of someone sort of coming into their own and affirming and having the strength to sort of voice themselves and be who they are. And so he really decided, probably in that moment, I'm going to squash that. I'm going to kill that. Now, I'm not saying that all young journalists of color deal with that. I'm not saying it's the template that everybody deals with it. But what I am saying is, I think I would like for these young people to realize that their presence is necessary to reflect the whole community. Mm-hmm. And when they come up against someone who is threatened by that, who feels that, you, for whatever reason, don't have the skills or the ability, or you don't belong here, what I would like to do is sort of strengthen or infuse or imbue them with a sense of, no, I got it. My voice is needed. Mm-hmm. To tell the whole story. I need to be here.
Okay, so what would you say to those people? And you are a good example of this. You didn't need a boost. You didn't need any extra. You're not a DIE hire. You did it on your own. You're at the top of your field. You're so respected. Former president of JAWS, I might mention. You didn't need it. Mentoring played no part in your life that you got it, or would you say otherwise?
That's what is so, I think, probably most frustrating for me in this whole discussion, in that, I'm sure we've all seen the meme or the whatever of two children standing at a fence, and the white child has a platform and he's looking over the side of the fence, and it's the start of a race, and the black child doesn't have that and is struggling to get to the top. And I think in all of these conversations of you know, you didn't need any support or whatever. What people don't understand is, human beings are different. Their emotional terrain is different. They just because I came from a certain background and achieved whatever I achieved doesn't mean that somebody else sitting next to me is going to have the same experience or the same abilities. But when it comes to the issue of race and stereotypes and the automatic assumption that you are less and not smart and not deserving, then that's what makes me afraid for the loss of opportunity that we've had in the past 2 years to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. It's not about, again, giving somebody something that they don't deserve. It's not about pushing someone else aside or taking something away from someone to give to someone else. Mm-hmm. It's about a group of people who are, before the race even starts, are dismissed, are thought of as less. I mean, we're looking at Kamala Harris right now.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yep.
People are saying, the discussion this morning, people shocked that she was so articulate and spoke so well and so smart. And again, this is a woman who was a prosecutor in California and brilliant and had $1 billion settlements. And yet even today, 2 months before an election that she's participating in, there is a perception that she's not ready for, she's not qualified for.
She's the DEI pig.
She's the only reason she's there is because of her skin color.
And maybe her gender.
And maybe her gender. And so I just feel like, again, there's a lot of ground for us to recover in this conversation. If we can separate the automatic defensiveness, the automatic feeling of my family never owned slaves, so I don't know why I have to talk about these issues. I think it's such a barrier for people who don't want to go deeply and don't want to think about it because it makes them uncomfortable.
Right. Another one of our JAWS members was recently on my podcast, Catherine Lanford. I know you know her. And she's done lots of political reporting now, environmental reporting. And she said that she feels like most of her career right now is apologizing for journalists in the past. Mm-hmm. And that MAGA, for example, that message, Make America Great Again, is really about myths. Don't let me have to give up my myth that journalists perpetuated, that we don't tell the truth about what it was really like in the past. America was not great in many ways.
Absolutely. Well, the recent story about the Emmett Till case. Oh, yeah. And the journalist who was involved and had information and withheld it for whatever reasons, for a lot of reasons. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, when you're dealing with half of the country that believes Haitians are eating cats, and people are stealing jobs that, good, solid white people deserve or whatever, or black jobs,
Trump's lovely phrase.
So when you think of the fact that so many people are unwilling to do the work to think about this whole issue of, lived experience and how my lived experience is different than yours. I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm not saying you owe me, but my experience, given the set of circumstances in this country, has created the need for a discussion about who has access to succeeding, who has access to being treated or not mistreated, not shot, not whatever the situation is. That's what I really am probably anxious about and worried about when it comes to not only this election, but my industry. I think this morning's conversation with Dale Anglin about Press Forward and what they want to do. This whole issue, I think, stems around the gatekeepers. Who is making the decisions about what's newsworthy, what's important, which stories should be told? I think there's a lot of progress in many areas, but we still have a very long way to go.
So a last question. 10 years from now, after you've been at work on this and you are a big success, your initiative has succeeded, how will journalism and or politics look different?
I think it'll be much more supple, it'll be much more flexible in that if the gatekeepers have changed, if there are more people who can spot the gaps and who can produce content and stories about the way our society functions and who needs to be involved in it, who's left out. Issues of health equity are very important to me. So I want to train journalists to be able to say or create stories that say it's interwoven. It's not just one sector. The well-being of the least is connected to the well-being of those who are fully resourced. And so I think if we have people in positions of decision-making in media who have that ability, my hope is that we'll have a less contentious society. We'll have a less, I mean, I know it probably sounds Pollyannish, but I believe that people who can tell these stories well without sort of raising that defensiveness and just I think it'll make a difference. I think it'll be positive.
You're listening to Rachel Jones. She's the Director of Journalism Initiatives for the National Press Foundation. Thank you for taking time away from the conference. I know you need to get back to another session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. I've enjoyed talking with you.
You're going to be hearing next from Jody Enda. She is another former president of JAWS. She is a remarkable journalist.
Thank you, Rosemary.
It's true. It's true. She's right now the Washington bureau chief and senior correspondent for the Fuller Project, about which we'll hear more shortly. She focuses on the effects of U.S. politics and policies on women and girls in America and around the world. Not much going on in that.
Not at all. Nothing to write about.
Jody has won tons of awards. She has covered government and politics at every level. I have talked to her about politics for years now. She's an expert. She's also a teacher, a speaker, and an advocate for women, a feminist. Very glad I can pull you away from JAWS enough to talk a little.
Happy to be here and talk to your listeners.
Good. Will you tell us a little bit about the Fuller Project? I was not familiar with it until you got involved with it.
So the Fuller Project is a nonprofit journalism organization, and we write investigative stories and accountability stories about women around the world in an attempt to catalyze positive change for women.
So does it have a public relations bent? If you found out something that women did bad, you wouldn't write about it?
No, we will write everything. But, mostly we're looking for injustice. And we report about that.
There's a little bit of that.
Hoping to bring change. And then what we do is, there's a little around the world. And then we give our stories to mainstream media organizations. So we do partner with places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian, and the New Republic, and Time Magazine, et cetera.
That's where we find your articles.
Yes, and Ms. Magazine. But we also have our own website, fullerproject.org.
That's good that you
So go there, please.
Jody has recently been in Ms. Magazine, 5 times now?
Yes.
Because of a big women's story that we know about, which is the Kamala Harris candidacy. Mm-hmm. That has melded your two interests, I think, feminism and politics. Does she have a chance? Has it been interesting covering her? Jody, let me remind my listeners, is a reporter, so she's not going to tell you she's for or against Harris. That would just be, they'd fire you for that.
Well, yes, I cannot do that.
So she will not do that, but I want her to give informed impressions to you of covering this race.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that I actually was working on a story partnering with Ms. even before Harris was the nominee. I was writing about polling on abortion and the impact that abortion rights might have in this election, and comparing what the pollsters for both the Republican and Democratic parties and also academics were seeing compared to what media polls were showing.
Interesting.
So,
and what did you find?
Well, media polls always say that the main issue that voters are concerned about is the economy. That's not untrue, but that's not necessarily the most motivating issue. Internal polls, not from the campaigns, but from party people on both sides, show that the most motivating issue is abortion rights since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And we've seen it. I mean, we saw it in 2022 in a big way. And we've seen what's happened in ballot measures in a number of states. Every single one of them has either enshrined abortion rights into their state constitutions or has gotten rid of, has voted down measures that would have banned abortion.
That also would account for the gap that we're seeing a bit widening between male and female voters. I'm
Correct.
Presuming reproductive rights is
that's a particularly big issue for women, not surprisingly. There's been a gender gap for a long time in American politics. Women are more likely to vote Democratic. Men are more likely to vote Republican, particularly white men. But of course, it varies election to election. But if you just had, say, men vote in the last presidential election, no women, back to the pre-dawn days when women couldn't vote, we would have had another Trump term. If you only had women voting, we would not have had Trump in the first place.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And I remember that at a news conference at Mar-a-Lago, this was before the debate, Trump was asked a question about reproductive rights, and he said, "No, I took care of that. There's not going to be an issue." And of course, not that I trust anything that he says when it comes to his campaign, especially. That seemed misguided to me. It seems like that's going to be a very
it's a huge issue, and I think you saw that in the debate. They've spent a fair amount of time talking about abortion, and I think that if you just look at Trump's behavior, you will know that he knows it's a big issue because he keeps changing his position.
He can't find a place where he knows he's more comfortable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he has decided now that he's going to take responsibility for the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe, but he talks about states' rights and now says falsely that everybody always wanted to go to the states.
I've given you what you want.
Only one side wanted it to go back to the states. Mm-hmm. People who support abortion rights wanted Roe v. Wade to be the law of the land.
Exactly.
And most thought it always would be.
Is there a threat of a national ban on abortion, whether or not Trump gets into office?
Well, if Harris wins, she would veto it, right? Mm-hmm. So that would, and it's hard to imagine that there would be enough support to override a veto. I mean, that would be very tough. I do think it could
pass if Harris were there, even that it would be passed.
If there's
the way the House Republicans.
If there's a Republican House and Senate,
right.
But if that happens, she would veto it, and I just really have a hard time imagining that they would have a supermajority and could override a veto.
Now, if Trump and Vance get in?
If Trump and Vance get in and they have a Republican Congress, then it's possible. I mean, of course, Trump says that he would not sign a national ban because he supports states' rights.
Yes.
But, given the strength of his support among people who oppose abortion rights, it's hard to imagine that he would not change his position on that.
Do you follow at all the efforts in the states to overcome or to further enshrine and protect abortion rights? I'm asking because, I'm sorry, in New York right now, there's Proposition 1, which is, they're calling it the Equal Rights Amendment for New York. We couldn't get it at a national level. But women are now pushing in New York for this. And it's under a lot of fire. The Catholic establishment is against it. Mm-hmm. The Democratic establishment is not firmly for it. And it's in trouble, I think.
Well, that's interesting. I follow it a little bit. I wrote a story actually out of the Democratic Convention that there is a national push still for the ERA. And one of the things that proponents of that say is that if the ERA had been in place, Roe couldn't have been overturned. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if that's correct or not. They say, lawyers say that. I'm sure there are some lawyers who would say the opposite, but they still are pushing for the ERA. And now actually 38 states have passed it, but whether or not Congress would extend the time frame is, that's a whole other
that may also
complicated
depend
issue.
on what party is in charge.
But what is interesting, Rosemary, is that there are a number of ballot measures about abortion that will be on the ballot at the same time as voters are voting on the president and Congress. And those could bring out more supporters of abortion rights. So in places like Florida and Missouri, which just got it, not that necessarily they were going to have a majority voting for Kamala Harris, but it certainly could make a difference in congressional races.
Absolutely. It's scary. Do you remember a few years ago, Jody, and this predates Trump, where there was a big debate, at least, on whether Republicans were in a war with women. They were going after women.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And Republicans poo-pooed this as foolishness. Looking back now, was there a war? Is there a war on women? And why are we a target?
Well, that's a really complicated question. One of my favorite books ever was Susan Faludi's book, Backlash. That was written during the Reagan-Bush era. I'm sure you read that. It's got an honored place on my bookshelf. I reread it actually not long ago because of what we're seeing out there. Yeah. I think it was accurate at the time, and it was predictive looking forward. I'm sure Republicans wouldn't say there's a war on women, but I think that what we've seen is there's an anger in the nation, and Trump did tap into this in 2016. There's an anger, particularly among some white men, that their dominance has declined. And who have they lost power to? Well, they've lost power to some women, and they've lost power to people of color. Now, as a woman, I would say, well, white men still have most of the power in this country, and people of color do not, and women do not. However, women are in the workforce more than they used to be. People of color have climbed the ladder, and I think those are good things. That I can say because I don't think it's partisan, but
you get fired over that. Come see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, I don't think that's an issue in my office, because I don't think I'd work for a place where people did not support
equality
on many levels. Races. On many levels, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I want to switch for the last question to something, and this is not your expertise, but climate is a particular interest to the Fuller Project, because the impact of climate change is just notably so much more on women than it is on men, women and children especially. And I'm struck by the lack of any discussion or big concern about climate in our current presidential or congressional races. No one seems really to be talking about. I understand there's a distraction. We've got 2 wars. We have the whole political turmoil and Trump coming back and all that. But why is climate, is it hard to talk about? Is it not a juicy issue? What's going on?
Well, I don't know why they're not talking about it. I think that it's an enormous issue. And of course, the candidates are very far apart on climate change. Trump calls it a hoax, and Kamala Harris agrees with scientists that climate change exists and supports, as the Biden administration has, strengthening efforts to reduce climate change. And the reason women suffer more is because women live in poor areas around the world more. And so, women and children, and like in so many areas, just suffer more from climate change than
Yeah, they're trying to make a living
do.
with subsistence farming. They're trying to live in places that are inundated with water in some places where I have worked. So yeah, it's there's no question that climate change. Well, I think there's no question that it's happening, and it's happening right now. It's not something in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can't seem to get a dialogue going about it.
Right. And, you know, in the debate, they were asked one question about fracking. That's a very narrow issue aimed at voters in Pennsylvania. But there is so much more to say about climate change than just one narrow issue.
Clean water, clean air are all part of the climate change issue. We didn't discuss it.
And, you know, what do you do about businesses, you know, that are still belching out dirty air and that kind of thing, and what sort of regulation should be in place?
You are an expert on this.
I'm not.
Political expediency keeps people from really getting at the issue, would be my thing. Like Kamala Harris asked about climate change measures to stop it. He said a sentence or two and then immediately switched to, but we still need fossil fuels. There's still a support for the jobs that are in existence that people are worried about. She's compelled to say that. She's compelled to say I'm against.
It would be very hard for anybody who wants to win Pennsylvania, which is the largest battleground state, to oppose fracking. And of course, no candidate's ever going to say, well, politically, it's not a good position for me to be in the same way that Trump doesn't explain why he switched from being pro-choice to being pro-life, which he did. And he's on record from previous years talking about his support for abortion rights, giving money to Planned Parenthood. Now he's in the opposite camp.
I have always...
We know why.
Yeah, I have always criticized American voters who give lip service to the idea that, oh, all politicians lie, we just want an honest one. But we punish politicians who are honest. And I keep going back to Hillary Clinton, who said to coal workers, your jobs are going away. We're going to work hard to get you training and move you someplace else, so the impact, but you are going to lose your jobs. She was crucified for that.
Right, and Trump said he was going to bring back coal jobs.
Which he didn't.
Which he didn't, because you can't.
You cannot.
And I will say, I spent a bit of time in northeastern Pennsylvania in 2019 and early 2020, before the pandemic, talking to people in areas that had been Democratic traditionally and then voted Republican for Trump, and that's coal country. And I asked all of them, when he said he was going to bring back coal jobs, what did you think? And they all said, oh, we don't believe that. We know it's gone. It's been gone for 50 years. So, but they voted for him anyway because they liked other things that he talked about, like about immigration.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess even the idea that immigrants are taking jobs you want, jobs that they could get. So
exactly. Except that immigrants really aren't taking jobs that most Americans want.
You're listening to Jody Enda. She is the Washington Bureau Chief for the Fuller Project. She's a fantastic and very experienced political reporter. And I wish we had more time because I could think of many more questions for you. Thank you for...
Well, this has been delightful. And please go to fullerproject.org and look up my stories and those of my colleagues.
Oh, good last word. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another Jaws goddess for you to talk to. This is she's a great journalist and writer. You're going to find that out in a minute, but she's also such a good friend. I'm very happy that you were talking to us. This is Michelle Weldon. She's a former professor, an opinion writer, that's current. Let's see what else. An author. We're going to be talking about her 7th book, Get That. She's raised kids on her own. She does memoirs. She encourages other women. You're like a role model. God.
Well, so are you.
I'm worshipful here. I'm worshipful. This is a fan club here. But I want you to tell my listeners about your new book. It's called The Time We Have, Essays on Pandemic Living. How'd this come about?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Rosemary. I'm really thrilled to be here. So it's a group of 25 essays with the time frame of the pandemic. Not everything's about COVID. I touched on a lot of different issues of relationships and family and partnerships and the workplace. Some of it's filled with grief and despair. There's joy in there and hope, and hopefully some humor. And there's a few chapters where I'm absolutely outraged.
Oh, good. Well, I want to get to the outrage and despair part because I'm a journalist. But I want you to talk about disinformation. You somehow managed to bring that into this book of essays.
That is a parallel pandemic. It began with in 2020 with COVID is a hoax, and we don't know where it came from, and you can cure it by swallowing some bleach. There are so many people who propagated these lies about COVID-19, and I used to not know the difference between misinformation and disinformation. And as a journalist for 4.5 decades, I have definitely committed errors, but it was not intentional. Like I got someone's spelling of their last name wrong, or they lived on street, not avenue, or I got the wrong spelling of their company they worked with. Now that is an error, and in fact, yes, but it's not intentional.
It's misinformation.
It's misinformation. Disinformation, oh my goodness, is the intentional, deceitful purpose of misleading people into believing something that is absolutely not true. And unfortunately, while it didn't begin with a pandemic, I think it reached a crescendo, and that crescendo is not dispersing. It's not lower or less harmful. We're witnessing that with the campaign, with eating kittens. Can we just say that part?
Yes, you can. That's a very good point. Who do you blame for it? The journalists who are not dispelling rumors, the newsmakers who are putting out the rumors, or the readers who just can't seem to differentiate between ridiculous, how can this be true, and it might be true, I better check into it now.
Well, I don't blame the people who consume the disinformation. The blame doesn't lie with one person or one organization or one media outlet. It's this cultural move of trying to sway people in a viral way. And disinformation wasn't born in 2020, but the way it moves across the world so widely, and spreads, just as fast as COVID spread, right? You sneeze on someone reads or hears or watches a piece of intentional disinformation, and then it spreads to their family, and then they tell other people, and no one to blame. And I wouldn't blame the people who consume it. I would say we need to do fact checking on things that seem spurious.
I don't know. I am more willing than you are to blame readers, consumers of the news. When would they ever have accepted things like Haitians are eating cats and dogs without some, how can that be true? At least some sort of skepticism. Now it's, if a certain person says it, you know who I'm talking about.
That's right.
It's taken as fact. Kamala Harris clearly beat Trump in the debate.
Absolutely.
Fox News said it. Everyone I know said it. If you watched it, you couldn't say Trump had a good night. And yet now it's all being spun that, he had a great night, except that Kamala Harris had the questions in advance, or she had earrings that let her tune into Barack Obama, who were giving her the answers. And people are believing it. I'm getting notes from them.
And then Lindsay Davis. Oh, this baby. I was at a debate watching party, and we're all screaming at the screen. And, when the person who shall not be named said, well, Lindsay Davis is a sorority sister with Kamala Harris, I was thinking to myself, I don't think I know any college-educated Black women who are not in that sorority.
Exactly.
There's millions. I wanted to look up, how many millions of women belong to that. And no, they didn't know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's like
but
saying-
that's an old racist trope that if you're black, you know all the other black people in the
Right,
country.
right. Yeah. But you know what? I kind of have a theory, and I'm not a historian, and I'm not a anthropologist, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I feel like that disinformation empowers people who have these notions, and they just want their absurd, ridiculous notions supported by someone they consider in power.
Wow.
So it gives them power, right? It's like, look who thinks the same way I do. I mean, for goodness sakes, there's flat earthers.
Oh my,
You know?
yes. Yeah.
It's like, well, don't go in the lake, you'll fall off. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I have a neighbor now who's trying to convince me that the world is flat. And I said, but I was at Antarctica. And he goes, oh, but you couldn't go past a certain point. I go, yeah, you can't because no one can live there. There's nothing there.
And it's 100 below zero.
Oh, it's because it's the end of the world, Michelle.
Oh,
You'd fall
okay.
off, see? Yeah. A turn here. How do you connect that in your book, which I understand is a series of essays, but how do you connect that, which is really about policy and kind of media and societal norms, with the personal experience of going through a pandemic?
Well, because it stems from the information that we receive. And, 7 million people died in the world from that. So it isn't just like, oh, that's wrong, turn it off, how absurd, they're crazy. It's deadly.
Yeah.
So, and something else may happen that, wrong information, and it could really harm people. And so that's how that's connected to COVID, because not really knowing what's happening and not being able to trust a news source or a source of information, that can be lethal. And we got to worry about that.
And it was very scary too.
That's scary. I was scared in the beginning of the pandemic, and I write about that because I was scared of what other people could do to me just by breathing on me. I was scared of going to the grocery store. I was scared of vegetables.
Yeah, coming home and scrubbing your vegetables, watching your mail. It was kind of nuts.
Let the mail, sit on the counter for a week. It's like, oh, well, maybe I should open that urgent bill. So I was afraid of other random things, like someone could sneeze on you in line, or you could touch something. You could touch, an escalator railing, or you get it from the peaches in the grocery store. And then also I was afraid of what I could do to other people. What was I carrying?
I'm living with my elderly mother. If I brought home the wrong germ, I could kill my mother. Yeah.
I had my brother Paul, who passed in 2021, he had multiple myeloma.
Oh.
So he was incredibly compromised. And I visited him every week. And, I wore a mask and I sat 6 feet from him. And I thought, oh my, I don't know if I could ever forgive myself if I got him sick. Because he wasn't strong enough for a vaccine.
Yeah.
No. So I was afraid of what I might do to someone else unwittingly, not just what, droplets could do.
Right. Well, Michelle already knows this. I have not read your book yet. I just bought it today at Jaws at our book bazaar.
So start reading it right now?
Yeah, I should. Maybe I should have you read a chapter. But I have read her previous books, and I think this fits into our line of talk here. Truth is important to you, and you tell truths about yourself.
That's right.
Not just about the world, that are personal and deep. You are a master memoir writer.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tie that all in together? And most people are embarrassed or shy or afraid. They don't write about the world and themselves the way you do.
Right. And, and a lot of people ask me that. I was like, well, do you write about everything? Absolutely not. I have boundaries. I don't write about, my sons, for instance, or, even my siblings without permission of what to say. I write about myself, and I write truth. And I couldn't tell a lie. I couldn't write a lot of things when my mother was alive because I didn't want my mother to know. But now, and you can appreciate this, I have grown sons. There are things I do not want the grown sons to know. But I feel like, there is a catharsis and a healing to writing truth. And not just for me, the person who's exercising that or exorcising that memory or that muscle, but I feel that other people connect to it. And I've had people tell me that for years. They come up to me and they say, I read your column in the Chicago Tribune when you got divorced. And I think about one sentence you said, I think about it almost every day.
Touches me.
You said and then somebody else told me they carried, a column in their purse and here it is. And it's like from, 25 years ago. And then when the woman who said, she remembered a sentence, I said, for goodness sakes, what did I say? And she recited a sentence to me. And it was like, wow.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, so then it really touches me deeply. And then not that the writing is altruistic, because I do it for love and money. It's my career. It's what I do.
It's your occupation. It's your
right. And I absolutely love what I do.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're running out of time. And for my last, it did, I know, because we talk well together. But for my last question, what does it mean for us that we don't know what truth is anymore? It worries me that there's nothing that's not contestable, that I can point to evidence, I can point to examples, and someone will say, well, that's your opinion. We don't have truth. We're in a
post. I think that's true.
Society.
I think that's not true. I think there are certain truths that are undeniable. I know how old I am from a birth certificate, and
show me your birth certificate.
Okay, I gotta go home and get it. But I had someone stand up. When my first book came out, I had someone stand up in a book signing and said, how do we know this is true? There are two sides to every story. How do you know? It's both sidism.
The both sides.
And so I said to this gentleman, where were you born? And he's, Cincinnati. And I said, I don't believe you. And he gets really aggressive. He was like, of course I was born. And said, my mother is from Cincinnati. And I'm like, see? There are not two sides to that story. There are some facts that are undeniable, like, rain is wet, right?
And I hear what you're saying, Michelle, but talk about this to Barack Obama, who suffered under Donald Trump's just barrage of untruth about where he was born. Exactly the example you're using.
Right, but he knew where he was born because his parents told him.
He knew it,
and there were
So you can't make others see the truth.
Yeah, but like flat earthers, you can deny. You could say the moon is made of green cheese, but there's certain things that are arguably incorrect and not factual. Like the moon is not made of green cheese, Rosemary. I just have to let you know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Geez, I think that's your opinion.
Right.
Okay, this fact is undeniable. Michelle Weldon is a wonderful writer. I encourage you to get her book, The Time We Have, Essays on Pandemic Living. Check out our website and my page to find out a little bit more about her. And thank you very much, Michelle Weldon, for taking time away from the JAWS conference in New Orleans to talk to us.
Oh, thanks so much, Rosemary. This was fun.
It is fun to do podcasting, isn't it? I hope my listeners agree.
Right.
Next in the hot seat is Lynn Sweet. She is the longtime Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. You've spent more than 40 years working for the paper, and most of that, if not all of it, covering politics.
Yes.
But you have probably seen her on CNN or on some other national shows because she is an authority in Washington on politics. So I'm very glad to have you here, Lynn.
And Rosemary, thanks so much for having me on.
Well, we're both here at the JAWS conference, and I'm pulling out some people in between sessions to talk with us. And I want to get your impressions. You covered it, and you know what happened at the Democratic National Convention. The two stars were the Obamas.
Well, there were some of the best speeches. I would think there were 3 mega speeches at the convention, not necessarily in terms of political importance, but in terms of the art of speech making. And the 3 best speeches were Michelle Obama first, then Oprah Winfrey, and then Barack Obama.
Wow, you put the 2 women ahead of Barack.
Well, because they are exceptional. We're talking about we're talking about gold medalists who all won within a tenth of a second. Okay, so there's not a lot to slice in between them, but as world-class orators, no matter what you think or where you stand politically, they have incredible ways to bring words to life and to sway a room. Now, having said that, by the way, and to pivot to the point of a political speech at a convention, it's to elect your candidate, Kamala Harris. She did not have to give a speech as good as Oprah Winfrey, Barack Obama, or Michelle Obama. She needed to do, and she did what she needed to do, which was to talk about herself, raise some issues, and do a really good job. She didn't have to make a world-class, oh my gosh.
Yeah. She didn't have to orate or be
she needed to be really good. She needed to be great, not great. And that also communicates at a more level that people could maybe pay attention as well. And no one expected her to do the kind of Broadway show performance in the world-class speaking. So there are many important ways to communicate. But since you asked, yes, the Obamas were two of the
top three.
Two of the superstar speakers at the Democratic Convention.
Amazing. Michelle Obama's appeal has always been interesting to me. She is beloved. She was named herself as a possible candidate when Biden's candidacy was first getting into trouble. She has always expressed no interest in going into politics, and yet that speech took some effort and some work.
Well, that speech, remember a few years ago in 26, where she captivated everyone with one line, when they go low,
we go high. Stupid line, but yes.
No, I thought at the time it was a wonderful line. When they go low, we go high. Something to live your life by. Well, that was then. This is now. That wasn't.
No, she took the low road this time.
I don't think it was low. Why don't we call it the real road? That there is a danger. She's going to talk about it. And at this point, years later, years after that speech, years after 2016, and knowing what we know, we're not taking that route anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's what she portrayed.
And also, she had many great lines in it, including when speaking to Trump. She said, "Now you're looking for one of those jobs that Black people."
Yeah,
that are for Black people.
Who's going to tell him that job he's looking for is Black job?
Right. So a lot has happened since then, and she was very instructional in what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and also had just some incredible ways of communicating her case.
It was a very powerful speech. I personally liked Barack Obama's better.
Yes.
I think he's a great speaker.
Well, but the thing he did memorably, we're on an audio medium now.
Right.
But to everyone who's listening, when he talked about Trump's obsession with crowd size. Now, everyone who's listening, put your hands together as if you're doing a little chopping thing, and then bring your hands closer together. You'll see when you're saying, and Trump has an obsession about crowd size, and you make a kind of a universal gesture that might be understood as to what that particular reference is to. That was also a masterful stroke. And by the way, that clip was part of a commercial that the Harris campaign made.
Exactly. And crowd size, of course, has become quite a theme and a way to poke Mr. Trump. That's for sure. So do you see Michelle Obama ever swaying from her sworn statement that she's not interested in politics?
Oh, it's ridiculous. With all due respect, the people that even raised this question, it never was so. There's no evidence. People make it up. And I don't know why there's no evidence that she has one teeny weeny interest in politics. And covering her as I have for years, she has a good life. She does what she wants to when she wants to. And she is a good campaigner. But the last thing she wants to do is sit on the phone and raise money for a campaign. She doesn't want to have to suffer through having a campaign where you have to go places and do things that you may not want to do when you don't have to. She's one of the most influential people on the planet.
Without holding any position. Right.
Or responsibility.
Right. Yeah. Oh, imagine that. She wants a job where she gets all the good parts and doesn't have to do the bad stuff. Yeah.
Well, let's just put it in the context of the upcoming few weeks left to the campaign. Obama will do more active fundraising, maybe by Zoom. He did an in-person event with Bill Clinton or Biden.
I remember it.
But will he go on the stump? Will he be on the road? I don't know. I think he might do. I'm guessing he might do some rallies. Michelle Obama is very, very, they both conserve their time. They only do things very strategically and targeted when and if it's useful. You notice they aren't making TV interviews. They don't do, they said what they said at the convention, and there's plenty of material for commercials to be made from what they did. And in past years since leaving the White House, Michelle Obama has been involved in voter registration, but the kind of voter registration drive and appeal to was, it would seem to be at Democratic voters are officially nonpartisan, good government, everyone should register to vote. So in this case, will anything change? Will, in just a state like Michigan, if the Obamas did events in certain parts where they could boost turnout among the Democratic base, that is the kind of thing that really could perhaps make a difference. But would they go on the road and do that kind of event? I see Obama more than Mrs. Obama. Why? Because she hasn't done it. But the stakes this time are so much higher. Yeah. And the candidate is someone that she, when she was at the convention, the thought should be there. She was speaking just a few miles from where she was raised in a tiny cramped apartment on Chicago's South Side. Where she was speaking was walking distance to her high school. Okay, and here she is, the wife of the first Black president, making a speech for the woman who could be the second. So I would think that she also knows what happened when Trump took office, that everything he could do, he tried to do to undo the Obama legacy.
Right.
So.
And maligned her family too.
Right. So you would think it would all add up to doing more than right. 2016. 2020, of course, was the COVID year, so you can't really
even Biden didn't do a lot of on the road then. Right.
Right. So in that case, we'll see. Now, also, by the way, if you want an update on the Obamas, they're very active in fundraising for their Obama Presidential Center, which is being built on Chicago's South Side, just a stroll from the campus of the University of Chicago. They're doing enormous fundraising for that. The opening of the first building, which will be a basketball court, at the south end of the campus, will be next year. The grand opening sometime in 2026.
So you're covering that. That's a story you regularly do.
I cover the Obama post-presidency.
Yes.
I closely cover the Obama Foundation and the lot, but not all of the post-presidential activities. But I do, and I have been on the site of the building, a work in progress.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So you see a future for the Obamas, obviously, but not necessarily in politics anymore. They're done with that?
In the sense of running for office, they oversee a Hollywood development company. They have right. deals with Netflix. There's enormous fundraising they have imposed upon themselves to fund and build their presidential center. I just did a column on their annual fundraising report. It just came out, the report to the Internal Revenue Service. Last year was a banner year, and this year was the lowest year. Last year they had 2 donations over $100 million. Okay, those are very hard to replicate. Right. So they had a dip in fundraising, and you got to get that thing built. The Obama Foundation is a sprawling operation. They have programs in more than a dozen countries, and they have fellows on the campus of the University of Chicago, Columbia, and they are just operating across the globe. It's a real expensive thing. I think they have 300 people on the payroll.
Amazing.
And all of that is on the shoulders of Barack and Michelle Obama to raise the money to keep this thing going.
So they don't have time to run for Senate again.
It wouldn't pay enough. Yeah.
That's
why when people even bother saying, and again, all due respect to you, I know why people want to talk about it.
We want it. It was seeing the both of them step up to the podium and speak in full sentences to inspire and soaring.
She is
it was remarkable.
And she could do all that and more
Right.
any day of the week without running for office.
I get the point. I get the point that you're making. When did you first realize that Barack Obama, this a Chicago politician that you have been covering, was something more than just Chicago, more than Illinois?
I knew the moment he made that speech in Boston, like everybody else. I suspected it, but I saw it in Boston. You know, we all saw it. So I also understood that that he was not a senator very long, like 8 seconds when he ran for president, wouldn't be a factor.
And no one paid it. No one talked about his inexperience.
They did, but so what?
Yes.
That is why, by the way, using his model, you have a new generation of candidates, including Kamala Harris, who ran for president with hardly being in the Senate with hardly a record, because she did run in the primary in 2020.
Right.
And she just hardly had been she was also a first-term senator at the time. Others who ran.
Trump is trying to make a big deal about that she had little experience in the Senate and then had to drop out of her presidential bid before she even got to a primary.
But before he goes too far in that, look at all her years as Attorney General in the state of California and her years as district attorney in San Francisco. So if you want to go down that route, let him.
And of course I don't, but I do want you to talk a little bit about Kamala Harris, because I was of the school that she was, a typical vice president, not very impressive, didn't do very much on the sidelines. Yet in 1 month, she consolidated support from the delegates and melded the very fractious Democratic Party. And some of that, of course, is circumstance. They had no other choice. But that's a remarkable feat of politics, and then pulls off one of the great conventions of all time.
So I never underestimated her. I thought reporters who wrote it, I thought we were living in a parallel universe, who didn't see what I saw. There is absolutely no reason to listen to her and observe her and think she was doing anything that merited the poor press she got. I think the press could have done a better job explaining what exactly her assignment was in dealing with the countries that were the source of the people coming to the United States, and her job to try and do something in these places to stem the flow of immigrants. She was consistently underestimated, not by me, and her main point also in this remarkable achievement, she had the nomination sewed up within hours of Biden dropping out.
It was
July
amazing.
21.
It was stunning.
But it also showed that either she had the best improv group working with her, or they were ready when the moment came. Either one doesn't matter for the moment. It will matter whoever gets the absolute definitive story for history, but we know the result.
Yes.
We also, if we could veer into the absurdity of some of the stories that the analysts, who usually I have great insight, wrote the silliest things about having a so-called open primary. We'll do this, we'll do that. Back in July 21st, when this happened, or in the run-up to it, they did not understand how the rules really worked and how you make a delegate and how you run a campaign and the rules of campaign finance. And also, there is no evidence that anyone out there would do any better than Kamala Harris. There is no name out there. No.
Yeah, I remember being in despair, saying, okay, if Biden is gone, there's no one who could.
There always was someone.
Apparently.
And there is one of the great flaws of the Democratic leadership, not to just read the tea leaves, and maybe you didn't want to say if he goes for her, maybe it helped not to pressure Biden out. But one of the big, if we do a press criticism here or a look back, you didn't know, you couldn't understand the process. And as a practical matter in the politics, knowing that one of the most strong and consistent voter base of the Democratic Party are Black women voters, were you really going to, for no reason, pass up the vice president? And what chaos would have happened if she would have, if there was a free-for-all? Because, by the way, who is they passing up? There would have been no committee of two that would have decided you run. Right. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
There is no way July 21 or in that days running up to it that anyone but her could have been the candidate.
Okay, so talk a little bit about how Biden came to drop out. And did you write ahead of time that, oh, he's obviously diminished?
No,
You know,
I did not.
did the press cover up? Did they not know? Was Kamala part of that? And what role did Barack play?
What you saw in the debate was the worst of the worst case, because people, if he was like that day in and day out, people would have written about it.
He wasn't like that in the State of the Union.
He wasn't. So that was in January. This is in June, July. Something happened that day where he was he had a low point in how he presented and acted. Was that how he presented behind the scenes? I don't know. I did not report this out. I did not report out this what you just talked to about who influences. I have one person to single out, though, because of her public statements, who had a big role, and that's Nancy Pelosi, the former speaker. So here's how she did it. Biden issues a statement saying, I am going forward, I'm in this campaign to win it, or words to that effect. And then Madam Speaker goes on, I think, MSNBC, can't remember what show, and she says, it's really time for President Biden to tell us if he's going to stay in the race. Well, he just said he's going to stay in the race, but it was not lost on people what she was saying. And that meant that his words were not being, you couldn't sell it. You know, Madam Speaker, he just said he was staying in the race. Why are you saying he should decide if he's staying in the race? It
did not compute, right?
Well, or it did.
It did compute.
It was.
Well, he has not forgiven her, apparently. They've not, I mean, the press reports.
Based on her public statements and interviews, she feels bad.
She's praying that they reconcile.
Yes.
And then he said in his speech that it isn't true. He's mad at the people who urged him to pull out.
We won't know the truth for a while on that one.
How do you, as a political reporter, judge when people are saying what they have to versus the truth?
Most of the time, in certain circumstances, you just know that you're getting a statement that does not reflect reality of that person. So, and I, for years now, sometimes I just don't use it if I think it's really far off what the truth is. I don't have to, I don't use everything that I get from someone. And if it really is not right, if I could avoid it. If it's something a mayor or a governor says, it's different. You have to use it. And, these things are part art, part knowing enough, maybe not using the statement, but looking for something else that's more explanatory. You're saying, well, that statement isn't what I was asking. Yeah, I go back, maybe try and report something. And this isn't just in this extraordinary case of what people really thought about Biden. It is true on almost any day of my professional career that people don't always tell you what's accurate unless you're looking for a question to a fact. What time is the ribbon cutting?
Then it gets pretty precise.
Yeah.
You are listening to Lynn Sweet, who is a longtime observer of Barack Obama and is the Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. She is rushing off to another session of the JAWS conference, and I'm very appreciative of your taking time off to come talk with us.
Rosemary, thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's an honor. Thank you. The toast this week is very easy. It's going to be a tribute and a salute to JAWS, an organization that I've been connected with for more than 20 years. It is the only journalism organization, it's the only organization of any sort I've ever belonged to that paid attention to its membership. We do count numbers and we diversify. And other than gender, because it's almost all women, men are not barred, but they don't want to come among us. Other than gender, this is a group that's so mixed by age, by the media that we work in, by our bents, by religion, any other way you can think of, we are there. And the idea is that we all support one another because we're all in the fight together to get to the bottom of stories about our government and the officials in power in business and otherwhere that control us. These women are fearless, and they have put up with a lot. They put up with job discrimination, with belittlement, with sexual harassment, now and increasingly with online harassment. And they do it all despite like horrible pay and a terrible family life, because you're pulled out as a journalist at any time. I once left an Easter dinner that my then husband, notice an ex, my then husband had cooked for his family, because I had to cover a nursing home fire on the other end of the state. And we did it because we believe strongly that people need to know what's going on in their community, long range, short range. I just admire these people so much. Thank you for listening, and a toast to Joss.